Believe it or not, I am a huge fan of Jesus. I spent most of my life, we're talking 30 years, identifying as a Christian. I see comments all the time of people saying, "Oh, I hope he finds Jesus. Keep searching, bro. You need Jesus." What people don't understand is I actually have a very deep understanding and knowledge of the Bible. I was raised in it. Now, while I'm a huge fan of Jesus and the wisdom that he shared throughout his time here, I don't identify as a Christian because most Christians here in the West, most people in America identify as Christians. They have a very strict belief that you have to accept the person of Jesus Christ into your heart as your Lord and Savior. Otherwise, you're going to this geographical location called hell when you die. Once I started having very objective experiences with the divine, I realized how false this is and how much of a manifestation of the collective human ego this interpretation of Jesus is. For example, Japan, I think it's something like 1% of Japanese population identify as fundamentalist Christians, which means that 99% of Japan is going to hell when they die. I actually have a lot of compassion and a lot of patience for fundamentalist Christians because that was my entire life. For the first 30 years, it was my identity. If I met a nice person, I was always secretly hoping that they knew Jesus so that way they weren't going to hell when they died. What broke me free of that belief was my objective experiences with the divine. I've had moments where I've had these very profound conversations with the divine, a back and forth. In dreams, during meditation, and even during plant medicine sessions. It's wild to see some of the fear-based comments I get on certain videos. People are calling me a wolf in sheep's clothing, a satanic Freemason. There was even a comment saying that I'm clearly demon-possessed because you can't see my pupils. I'm Italian. I have dark brown eyes. I'm not demon-possessed. I also understand that some of the viewers have seen my mushroom trip video that I made a while back, where I'm having these channeling experiences and these seemingly dark entities are coming to the surface and speaking through me. If you look into Carl Jung's work, human beings have autonomous personalities living within their subconscious that they're unaware of. When you have deep wounds and deep traumas, and you face those things in a very real way, they can come to the surface and they can be very shocking. It's not demons. A huge theme in the Bible is that you will know people by the fruit of their actions. I know a lot of fundamentalist Christians where the fruit of their life just is not good. And you will know a tree by their fruit. Of course, I don't want you to take my word for it. You're on your own path, your own spiritual journey if you're someone who's seeking. I had a really great conversation with someone in the Conscious Men community. His name is Jonas. And so I just wanted to share a clip with you of us discussing some of these things. We don't just talk about Christianity, we talk about what spiritual awakening is, what enlightenment is, the difference between pain and suffering. I just thought it was an interesting conversation that might be of value to some of you. I have a reverence for the Bible and all spiritual texts, but the Bible specifically, there are tons of misinterpretations that I think were skewed specifically by the church to control people. Whenever you constantly believe that you're this wretched, shitty human who needs an external savior, you're going to be very easy to control and very easy to manipulate. The church knew this. They were very smart. I believe that Jesus was very important because it showed us what the potential of human beings was once they go within and they see the true essence of their being. I believe his message was love. And if you are a fundamentalist Christian and you believe the Bible in every aspect, literally, there's no judgment there, and I understand. You might even be praying for me that I find Jesus. But what I have found is exactly what Jesus was trying to share with the world. When your eyes have been opened and you have objective experiences with the divine, there's just no going back. When I gave up my faith in literalist Christianity, I lost friends, I lost family. I basically had to allow my whole past life to die, and it was very painful. So it's not something that I take lightly. I just want to say some of these things because when I was sort of going through that transition and I was very confused, I thought that spirituality might all just be bullshit. I think a video like this would have helped me along the way. One thing I'll say is don't ever take anybody's word for anything. Be a seeker, open your heart, search for truth on your own. The problem with a lot of literalist Christianity is that these people, they stop seeking. because they believe that since they've asked Jesus into their heart, they have all the answers. And so they close their heart, they close their mind to everything else. The divine did not stop speaking to people 2,000 years ago. The divine still speaks today more than ever. So now that you have context, I hope that you enjoy the clip. You are loved, you matter, and you've barely scratched the surface of what you're capable of.
Yeah. Well, dude, that's yeah, you nailed it. It doesn't always have to be like childhood trauma. If anything,
Mhm.
it's just the day-to-day stuff. It's creating that awareness of like, okay, I guess the childhood stuff comes from the the cause. There's a
Yeah.
reason why you're impatient like that. And I
Mhm.
had the same exact thing within me. One of the biggest catalysts as you get older is children, because it's like that on steroids. You know, they don't understand anything. And
Yeah.
so explaining, it's not even like dealing with like a complex technology. It's just like dealing with like, because I have this memory still. I mentioned it in a previous call where I had this memory of like me being a little kid, my dad getting frustrated because I couldn't say my ABCs basically. And him just getting like, no, you're like, just do it. You know what I mean? Because it's just like when you understand something in your physical brain and someone
Mhm.
else doesn't, it does get very frustrating for a lot of people who just, yeah, have deep understandings of things. So there is a root to that. And just your awareness of that, most people go through their life on autopilot, dude. They don't
Yeah.
sit, they don't think about these things really, or they might for a second. They might have an impassing thought of like, man, sure wish I was more patient. Anyway,
Yeah.
you know, and then like nothing ever
Yeah,
changes.
but
And
patience
so,
actually that you talk about is a huge thing. I'm very impatient or most of the time. It's sometimes I can like with my logical thinking I can like process it and then I'm not impatient on a logical level, but I still feel the urge to move quicker. Sometimes when I'm just in the streets and the people in front of me are like walking too slow, I get like mad and like, why are they walking so slow, man? I want to go this and there, you know?
yeah, no, dude, totally.
Yeah.
And that's just part of being a human being. And
Yeah.
what, you know, your growing awareness and consciousness does, you're able to go within yourself and almost sculpt the kind of person that you want to be. It's like, well, deep down, there's like this higher self that knows I want to be more patient, that knows that I
Yeah.
want to be more kind, that knows that I want all these things. And then something like the Catalyst Journal is how you take actionable steps to become that person. And
Yeah.
so that's why we call it work. It takes time. And um, and that's also, it's more difficult a lot of times for very intelligent people. So I know that seems very strange, right? Sometimes like you will be people who are very simple, you know what I mean? Like they don't have a lot of intellect, but they're very kind, they seem a lot more patient. And the reason that is, we're going to go deep here for a second, okay?
Yeah.
This is going to be good. But so I have a lot of contemplations from observing my 4-year-old son. He's
Yeah.
got this innocence. He lives his life just in total happiness and bliss. He walks around, he's like, look at the trees, look at the birds. He's so happy. He has zero intellect and he has zero wisdom. There's this natural progression that happens as human beings. We start out very innocent and we are so joyful, you know, unless we get triggered by something, we'll have like a trauma, but then we'll bounce right back to just happiness to be alive. And so what happens is you get to a certain age and then ego comes in for the first time. You have these identifications. That's my toy. I'm so and so. I do this.
Yeah.
And then that's where suffering comes in. And let me define suffering real quick, because there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is I cut my arm, I'm bleeding, I'm like, ow. Suffering is the psychological aspect of being like, oh no, I'm bleeding. How long is this going to take to heal? Will it ever heal? Oh my God. That's suffering. Our mind takes pain and it makes it worse. It perpetuates it and makes it into suffering. And so, for the first time, as children have an ego and they start to have this intellect, they begin to suffer. And
Mhm.
that is a huge stage of life. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, has a quote. It's an amazing quote, very simple. He says the first half of a human being's life is developing a healthy ego. And then the last half is learning how to let it go. And essentially, because when you let it go, you become more childlike. You become more
Yeah.
like a child again. Like, oh, everything. Hey, like whenever I'm like taking a walk and I see strangers and we make eye contact, I'll smile because I'm just like, hello. Like I'm just happy to see them. It's like this
Yeah.
weirdest thing. And so what happens at that point is once you've acquired wisdom and intellect, then the goal is to like get back to your innocence. Like, how do I get back to this innocence that I had? And a lot of like very spiritual, like ascended masters, that's what they're like. They're literally like these happy, joyful people who have a shit ton of wisdom, like very powerful, universal wisdom, but they don't identify. They're just like these like open, loving people that are here to serve and just be kind and all this stuff. But they went through that transformation. So
Mm-hmm.
ideally, in the course of a human being's life, you're a child, you have innocence, and then you get your ego, and then from the ego, you acquire wisdom. If you are open to the lessons, if you're open to the highs and the lows and all the things that the pain and suffering is trying to show you, you start to acquire this wisdom. And then once you have that, and you're like, all right, I have all this wisdom, but I'm suffering all the time. People are annoying. I'm annoying. Life is annoying. Then it's like when you take steps and delve into spirituality and go back into the true essence and you become innocent again, then you're able to like really serve the world from a place that isn't so self-centered, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
only reason why I'm even able. So me 3 or 4 years ago, the thought of me standing right here and just talking for a period of time, my ego wouldn't have let me do that because it would be too concerned of how I would come across. I would suffer just by the sheer thought of like speaking and giving like a lecture of some kind. Oh, how
Yeah.
am I perceived? Do I come across this way? Do I seem ignorant? Do I seem like I'm full of myself? I don't know. All these thoughts. And the thing is,
Yeah.
all those thoughts are still there. But now there's this level of detachment from it to instead of going deeper into those thoughts and identifying with them, I'm able just to observe them. Be like, that doesn't serve me. That doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help anybody. And I'm able to just acknowledge them but
Mm-hmm.
not like latch onto them as my identity.
It's
And
like
that's why I'm able to speak to you this way.
Mhm. It reminds me of meditation. Someone told me like when you have thoughts, when you're meditating, you don't push them away. You just let them, you recognize them and then they fade away like naturally. It's like the same with meditation almost. Or
You can actually replace the word meditation with observing. That's it. And if anything, I feel like it psychologically makes meditation easier. Instead of just like, oh, I gotta go sit now and meditate. It's so boring. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go observe. I'm gonna sit with my eyes closed, watch the thoughts as they come and go without judging them, allow them to be there. And this is how that slow process, for some people, this is how they awaken for the first time. Spiritual awakening, all it is no longer seeing your thoughts as you. You're like, holy crap, like all these thoughts, you mean all these thoughts that are happening aren't actually me? It's like, no, they're on autopilot. You are the observer of the thoughts. And the
Mhm.
essence of that observer, the more you get in touch with that, is just happens to be very kind and very loving and very
Yeah.
patient. Um, and so this is like this is spirituality in a nutshell,
Mm-hmm.
put into the simplest language I could possibly put it into. And ascended masters like Jesus Christ,
Mm-hmm.
embodied this on the deepest possible level. And that's why his teachings and his example are so powerful. And if you look at all different religions, there's some ascended master or somebody that embodied these things.
Mm-hmm. I understand. So you wouldn't say that spirituality and religion does not contradict itself. So it could be both actually, or what's your opinion on that?
You can have spirituality without religion.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have religion without spirituality. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things where I know a lot of religious people who are very hung up on religious traditions, religious hierarchies, and things like that. Um, but they suffer a lot. They're
Mhm.
constantly in a place of suffering. Their mind is always going. They're always judging themselves, they're always judging other people. And religion is a signpost to the deeper spiritual things. But if you start to make an idol out of the signpost itself, it defeats the purpose. There is another concept that I want to tell you about. It's called the spiritual ego. And that is the only downside. That's one of the downsides of spiritual awakening. The first time you realize that you're no longer your thoughts, but you're this awareness, this being that is watching the thoughts, your spiritual ego is born. And basically, I say this a lot, but it wants to have an ego about not having an ego. It's like, look how spiritual I am. I'm so righteous. Look how, and it's like, and people oftentimes when they get into religion, they get pulled into that spiritual ego, and then that is their new identity, essentially.
Mhm.
So all these things are very nuanced, and the ego is very tricky. And the ego isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just this built-in mechanism in our minds that's there from evolution for survival. It's in order
Yeah.
for us to survive. And the social dynamics throughout tribes and history, it used to be life or death, And so the mind is very critical of you because it's like, oh no, if you're not perceived correctly, you might get kicked out of the tribe. And then if you get kicked out of the tribe, you might die because you won't be able to survive. And so it's still in place, even though we don't need those mechanisms the same way that we used to. They still run our lives and they cause a lot of suffering.
Because you talked about Jesus Christ, are you Christian or
Hmm.
just spiritual?
Yeah, great question, man. I
Mm-hmm.
don't identify as a Christian, but I have a
Mm-hmm.
deep reverence for most religions,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the ascended masters within those religions. And I consider Jesus Christ to be an ascended master who fully knew who he was in his deepest essence and was the embodiment of what true enlightenment through oneness looks like. He basically started to blur that line, that that veil of separation, because he was known to love and spend time with outcasts, people that were prostitutes, people that were diseased, people that were less than. He was just like very present and very loving towards them, and he just knew who he was on a very deep level. And I think that he was showing what's possible for the human being, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say I identify as a Christian because, okay, we'll go deep here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Christian means Christ like.
Yeah.
So on paper, yes, I would hope that I seem like a Christian because I would like to be Christ like. But I think the Christ is within, and the Christ is, the being of every person. They just don't realize it or see it. So I feel like modern day Christianity should really be called Paulianity because Paul was the writer of the New Testament. A majority of the New Testament, there's this guy named Paul who wrote it. And a lot of Christians really identify with his interpretation of who Jesus was. And I don't resonate as much with that,
Mm-hmm.
if that answers your questions. But I do. The reason I know so much about Christianity, Jonas, is because I was raised Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, I went to school. I had all this theological knowledge and things like that. And I discarded it for a time once I stepped away from religion and Christianity. But now I'm finding my way back to those teachings and I'm seeing the deeper truths within it. So I resonate with it as a spiritual text. And I see the truth that's in it, but I wouldn't say I'm a Christian.
Okay, but not like there's like this God in the air. He's who's watching us all the time and is omnipresent. That's not like what you believe, or.
Yeah, I don't believe in God as a separate deity.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, if I'm being honest, I believe that God is literally in everything,
Mm-hmm.
and is pure love, and also the essence of who we are. I believe that God, infinite intelligence, is having a unique experience through every individual on this planet. And it's this very creative way to have a new experience. Because if you were infinity,
I
okay,
saw, can I interrupt you real quick? I
yeah, go
saw a
ahead, go
video
ahead.
from kurz gesagt. It was exactly the concept you talked about. There's like all people on the world are exactly the same person, and then this is how God is created. God must live every life on the planet before he can be God. So he has all the experience from everyone in the world at the same time, and he doesn't know it. It's like the Truman Show. He's interacting like with everyone, but he doesn't know like that everyone he's interacting with is actually himself. It's a very good video. It now I get the point of the video. Before I was watching, oh, like great concept, ha ha ha. But now I get it. It's like, spirituality. I wasn't ready before.
What's the video?
Man, I can look it up. It's like an animated. Do you know the channel Kurz gesagt? I believe it's from him. He makes like
Okay.
explanation videos on like nuclear bombs, how the world is created, what
Okay.
is
Well,
good.
after this
Yeah.
call, you should post it. I'd be curious to watch it. But yeah, but essentially, basically, if you were infinity, Jonas, if you were infinite intelligence and infinite
Mm-hmm.
love, and you just existed and have always existed, you'd be
Yeah.
like, I want a new experience. So this physical life, I feel like, is like almost like the ultimate video game that God is playing through every
Yeah.
individual. And the ego is such an intelligent design that it's essentially what causes the forgetting. And so the ego just thinks you are this body, you are this character, you are these thoughts. And what spiritual awakening is having an experience for the first time where you're like, I don't think I'm my thought. Like you have an actual moment, not just intellectually from me telling you, but there's a moment where you have this separation. And sometimes that happens, on things like cannabis or mushrooms. That sometimes
Mm-hmm.
is what gets people started on the spiritual path. And then what enlightenment is a permanent detachment from your ego, where you
Mm-hmm.
essentially remember who you are as God. And you're just like, well, I'm here having this human experience. Let me just like have fun and love people and not hurt anybody and
Mm-hmm.
try to help other people awaken to who they are. These are very deep concepts. I usually don't go this deep because I still honor the human. I still
Mm-hmm.
honor the human experience of, especially men, learning how to like interact with women, how to get in shape, grow muscles,
Yeah.
like all that stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff's a lot of fun. I'm not
Yeah, of course.
identified with any of it. I don't give a
Mm.
shit, but I do enjoy it because it's part of this human experience. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people, before they get to spirituality, they need some of these other things first. And I think there's something really beautiful about that.
Yeah, I dived a bit deeper because you announced like a special guest on
Yeah.
the video call, and I checked out his channel, and it was like first it was like completely different. He talked about like some ancient creature, the Ra, who built the pyramids in Egypt, and I was like, what is he talking about? You know, it seemed like some magical fantasy. It's completely different from what you
Yeah.
are talking about. You know?
So that stuff, his name's Aaron Abkey, by the way. Everyone go down the rabbit hill. Go down the rabbit hill. Go down, his channel. There's some really interesting concepts, especially if you were raised in Christianity. Him and I have similar backgrounds. I think that's why I was drawn to it. It's very rare, dude, for a person to be raised in a specific religion and have been taught that if you don't believe this religion, you're going to go to a geographical location called hell. That's terrifying for a
Yeah,
child. Lots of
of course.
trauma,
Yeah.
lots of things. I grew up in that. I'd say 95% of people who grow up in that never break outside of that. That's just what they believe for the rest of their life. And so it was very lonely for me when I was starting to have my own spiritual awakening and start to like really go deep with like, what is God? Who is God? Who am I? Why are we here? And I felt very lonely during that experience. And then when I found his channel like a couple months ago, I was like, this guy is basically gone through the same stuff I have. He's just leaned even more into the intellectual side of
Mm,
spirituality. So it's just very interesting. I think at the very
yeah.
least, even if you don't resonate with everything he talks about, I think it's going to be a really interesting call.
Yeah, definitely. I think so
Yeah.
too, yeah. But I have some experience with like psychedelics also. I even tried like DMT, and I had like
Wow.
one experience. Not every trip was like before I haven't even heard about spirituality, but I mean I heard about it, but I didn't quite knew anything about it. But now I remember a trip where I was in my bed, I smoked DMT, and I was 10 minutes just in a waiting room and that's it. I didn't even see anything that was real. I was just in a waiting room and I couldn't do anything about it. I think it's something like I could have gone like beyond that, but for my mind at this time it was like impossible, you know what I mean?
Yeah, DMT is crazy. I've never taken it, but the
Yeah.
stories that I've heard from it, I've had mystical experiences similar to that accidentally in meditation, like very short
Yeah.
experiences, and even like with mushrooms and whatnot. Um, Basically, a higher intelligence is undeniable once you have
Hmm.
experiences like that. It's not even a matter because there's a lot of arguing, a lot of theological arguments, and people arguing about spirituality. But when you have objective experiences and you're an intelligent person, you're not just like cracked out. Um,
Yeah.
a prime example of that is, have you heard of Terence McKenna?
Terence McKenna. I don't
Terence
know.
McKenna. Okay, he's one of the
Terence McKenna.
first. He's one of the first deeply intellectual people who
Hmm.
dove deep into like compounds like mushrooms, and the way that he describes it like his IQ is probably top on the planet. He's dead now, but when he was
Hmm.
around, he was considered to be one of the most intelligent people on this planet. And just
Yeah.
hearing him talk about these compounds and the connection to God and deeper self, um, I've spent before I ever took mushrooms, I probably spent like 100 hours listening to his lectures. Even if
Yeah.
I didn't fully understand it, there was like these deeper elements to it that really resonated with my higher self and with my heart. And then it was just going down that path was inevitable at that point. Um, but yeah, dude, psychedelics are just a tool. I don't think it's something
Yeah.
not everybody should do. And I don't think everybody should get hung up on them, but
Yeah,
they
and you
can
need
just,
a strong psyche, or I don't know what it's called in English, like
yeah.
strong mindset for this. Because I know a lot of people, if they would take like acid once, they would go crazy, maybe, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Some people are
Mm.
they have like a history of like schizophrenia and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And those compounds can basically trigger those things. So
Mm.
and that's why, yeah, there's still
Yeah.
so much we don't know. But all right, guys, I think I need to call it because I've got another call that I have to jump on here in a couple minutes. But this was a really good one, man. I feel like we covered some solid topics. And Benet, great to see you, man. I always love when you're on these calls. Whenever you have another person who's also like a coach, it really just elevates the conversation because you're also a very curious guy. You ask really good questions and you offer so much to the community. And hey, Jonas, is it pronounced Jonas or Jonas?
Jonas, actually, but you
Okay.
can pronounce it Jonas. I don't mind it.
I'll just call you by your actual name from now on instead of being like,
Okay.
hi, Jonas. It's a very American thing to do to just like pronounce people's names wrong without
Yeah,
ever like questioning it.
in English class, when I needed to introduce myself first, I also said Jonas. So,
Right.
yeah,
Jonas. I like your actual
Jonas.
name. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, good, man. Thanks for getting so involved with the conversations. It's really it's been great.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
appreciate.
gonna try to do another call this week potentially. Let's see, what's today? Thursday, potentially on Saturday, but don't hold me to it. Life's been a little bit crazier on my end. So, like we said before, I've been trying to, at the very least, have the calls be quality, even if we can't get the quantity, just diving in really deep. And I love the openness. I feel like we're getting into this groove now where we're just like unapologetically going deeper, asking questions, being honest and vulnerable. Like I want more of that. And I promise to always do the same. I'll always be open with you guys, with my journey, with where I'm at. I'll never bullshit you. And yeah, I'm grateful for you guys. Good call today. I'll talk to you soon.